to the recording secretary. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes. No action can be taken by the commission at this time. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled for a future commission agenda. In addition to this public comment period, public comment limited to 3 minutes per speaker will also be allowed on each agenda item, each agenda action item, but not on reports or informational items unless otherwise noted on the agenda. Vice Chairman?
Gerald Lent. Dr. Lent.
Nope.
Gina Greason.
Sorry, I'm not ready. I go.
I'll put you down. Pamela Garden. Karen Taylor.
I'm going to pass. Thank you.
Dawn Sefton.
On Seth? Want a raise? We only want to hear from him when we got things that need to be fixed.
Yeah. Doesn't appear that anything needs to be fixed. I wanted to respond to Commissioner Howell's question earlier. I was able to look up the information. I have copies of the print images of the licenses. It turns out if you go to a POS agent like this guy did, his friend, we actually keep the image of the license, and so we know exactly what happened. He bought his first license on the 3rd of March in 2011 with a POS agent, and that was, I believe, Bass Pro, and he got 2 stamps with it, and he was a resident. He went back in October rather than September. I think it was October 8th, and he purchased an additional stamp. When he did, the clerk, as I mentioned earlier, every time, and I think Commissioner Rain can testify to this because he's run this system before, you have to answer the question of whether the person is a resident or a non-resident. At that point in time, the clerk said he was a non-resident. Why? I don't know. I wasn't there. But what happens is he didn't lose his resident license. If you look at the printout of his license, his resident license is still there. If you look on the other side of the license where his name and address is, it says residency, and it no longer shows resident since 1958. Instead, it says non-resident. Then, apparently, when he went the next year to get a license on the 20th of March, the person looked at it and said, "You're a non-resident." They didn't look at the other side to see that he had a resident license the previous year. They also could have just said, "We'll make you a resident," because you're supposed to answer that question every time. And this begs, I guess, the question of, can a person be a non-resident and hold a resident license? Yes, if you purchase a resident license and you change your resident status, it's perfectly valid for us to print that on the license. Through the end of the license year, you can continue to be hold a resident license even though you've changed your residency. You simply can't be a resident in 2 states at the same time. That's what the rule is. So basically everything happened as it should have, with the exception of the clerk at Walmart should not have answered that he was a non-resident. And I have copies of all 3 of his licenses and can show them to you.
That's exactly what he said.
Yeah, so I mean, the system didn't sell him a non-resident license. The system behaved as the clerk told him to. So
Bass Pro also.
no, Bass Pro sold him a resident license. Walmart sold him a non-resident license as a stamp. That was the only license that was marked as non-resident, was his stamp, because a stamp can be either one. And then apparently when he went back to Bass Pro, they balked at calling him a resident because they looked at his last license. And in fact, it doesn't matter what your last license was. Every time you buy a license, the clerk is to ask you if you're a resident or not a resident, and they fail to do that properly. So,
Okay.
so not a system change, perhaps a training change maybe for both Walmart and for Bass Pro.
Okay. Thanks.
It's really easy to screw up. It's really easy to screw up on the system. You got to hammer on your people constantly. Not his fault.
Kathy Smith. Jonah M. Strong Voice Soldier. Gina.
See anybody?
For the record, Gina Greisen, Nevada Voters for Animals. Speaking from Nevada Voters for Animals right now. through every one of these processes, we've had to go through the Clark cab because that's where I live in Clark County. I don't think it's been any secret that we give a no vote of confidence to the Clark cab. There's been so many issues, I don't even know where to begin, but we'll just start with the Bobcat video. So here we have Tracy Truman, who sits on the cab, who was, I believe, also the vice president, not only of the cab, but I believe, and I'm not sure if he still is, vice president of the Nevada Trappers Association, and he's pretty important because he was just on the phone while we were on recess to approve that shooting map. I'm disturbed that I have heard since we've been meeting with folks in Mount Charleston and Mountain Springs and things like that, and since I started investigating a lot of what was going on, and it started with a report that there was a man arrested for taking traps that were Tracy Truman's traps in the Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area, within that area where I described earlier as being close to trapping. There was an investigation through NDOW. So what I would like to do is request an investigation of the investigation of Tracy Truman's stolen traps. I have great concern, not only since, because I kept hearing how there was trappers, they don't ever really do anything wrong, or they follow the rules. Here you had a Clark cab member who not only stepped down in shame over the Bobcat video, I also heard he was issued a 96-hour visitation ticket at some point, I believe in 2008. And then we find out he was illegally trapping in Red Rock Canyon. Except that the man who removed the traps was the one arrested by, I believe the arresting officer, and I'll say allegedly, was Ryan Anderson, who also now sits on the Clark cab and who testified on Senate Bill 226. Very disturbed. So I'm hoping there will be an investigation because that's 2 members already. And I want to say, the man was arrested, I guess, under NRS 503454. It is unlawful to remove or disturb the trap of any holder of a trapping license while the trap is being legally used by the holder on public land or on land where the holder has permission to trap. That was public lands. And the man, this other guy, was arrested by another cab member who was not on the cab, I don't believe, at the time, but still, he now sits on the cab. So I have nothing but concerns about the folks that are making decisions for Clark County residents regarding trapping, hunting, or any kind of other activities dealing with managing Nevada's wildlife that belongs to all Nevadans. So I'm going to ask that, and I know that there's been a bone of contention over this map, which I pointed out, which I was told I was wrong. With all due respect to the Chief Game Warden Bonamici, he tried to show me that map, and I said it's wrong, and he said, you will argue with anybody. And I said, if it's wrong, yes, I will. And I do believe that even the arresting officer in this, the allegedly arresting officer in this case, admitted during the last meeting, well, apparently, what was it he said? Nobody knew it was out of bounds, was what he said when we kept talking, when I pressed this issue, because we were using that land as the 1 mile under the federal supplemental rules. So I would hope that you guys would push for an investigation into that situation, because not only was Tracy Truman illegally trapping, and I believe that, and I don't know who would prosecute, if it's too late, if it would be the federal authorities, what it would be, but I'm also deeply concerned that that NDOW didn't do further research before they referred that case to Metro to allow apparently 7 to 10 officers to go to this man's house over stolen traps and some couple trail cameras. That's wrong. And I also would like to say that when I attended the Mountain Springs Board, NDOW was there, and they gave this trapping data, Hunt Area 262, 2010-2011 season information about the bobcats. It was interesting that it was only about the bobcats, but that's fine because bobcats seem to be the big topic these days. And I was curious when I saw that there was only 5 trappers, and there's a mandatory questionnaire, I believe. So a lot of these issues that we're having so much heartache about and discussing, I mean, bobcats are the most lucrative pelts, right? They're the most expensive ones that you can get money for. 5 trappers we're talking about here that we're dealing with in the Spring Mountain Range in this Unit 262, which is most of that area we're talking about. So I believe that there's a lot more than 5 people that are not happy with with the trapping that's going on there and causing so many problems. Would I love to ban trapping up altogether in Clark County? Absolutely, I would. I don't think there's any secret about that. But I do hope that we can work, on this committee that you're talking about to really put in place some fair rules and regulations that will balance the needs of everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joel Blakesley.
Simply want to thank you guys for a 2-year process. It was about 5 days short of 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay. Okay, come on up.
I did. I put action items. Yeah, probably need to talk to public comment based on a comment I have.
Come on up. You're up now.
Yeah, Graham Stafford. I'm now representing, I'm the conservation chair for the Sierra Club's Great Basin Group, which is the northern half of Nevada. And I just want to tell NDOW and the commission that we fully support the responsible management of wild horses, the overpopulation of wild horses. We fully support the gathers and roundups done by NDOW, BLM, and Forest Service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dixon, Dr. Dixon.
Paul Dixon, Clark County Cab. As I mentioned in my action report to you, as I have all the way along, there were a lot of things that were not agendized, discussed, related to the trapping issue. What I wanted to submit for the record were 2 county commissioners sent letters to me and asked me that I forward them on to this commission, so I'll give them to the secretary, outlining some of those issues. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Is that it? Any other public comment? Okay, so Commissioner Rain, we stand adjourned?
No, recess.
No, recessed. Recessed. I'll get it right sometimes.
Recess.
Okay.
Recess.
8:30.
8:30.